Welcome to the Ywk Podcast. I'm Becky, and today I'm joined by Olly, our usual co-host, as well as a special guest who Olly is going to introduce for us.
So this is Ruth. I had the privilege of having Ruth in my youth group when I was a youth worker, and now Ruth works for UDB Birmingham. Yeah, I'll let you say more about that, Ruth.
Yeah. Yes. So as Olly said, I was in his youth group and then became a young leader, have then continued doing youth work at my church in Birmingham. And now I'm a youth worker at UDB, which stands for Urban Devotion Birmingham, a detached youth work charity, Christian charity doing detached youth work across North Birmingham.
Nice. So how did you get into that particular role? How did you get into youth work generally? And then how did you get into the role of working for a Christian youth work charity?
Yes, so youth work in general. As I said, I was probably about 14, thinking that I was an adult being the responsible one for young people, but actually was so formational in becoming a youth worker. So being given opportunities from being as young as 14 to then be kind of a youth leader for those in year 7. Was actually really the beginning of it, and just loved it and just love coming alongside young people, whether that's in like a wider group or a mentoring capacity. Just loved that. So then when I went to uni and left St Leonard's where I grew up, first thing I did was join the youth team at Gas Street, my church in Birmingham, and again just continued to love it for the same reasons. Then as I came to the end of my degree, which was biomedical science and nothing to do with youth work, I was talking to different people at church, my mentor, and they were like, what do you want to do? What's God really placed on your heart? And I was like, oh, good question. But I would say something to do with young people and actually something specifically with education. So that was my kind of niche there. And she said, well, I happen to know a charity, which her husband actually started, who are looking for a female youth worker to work in schools. So I was like, oh, there we go. So that's how I ended up here. My role has changed a lot since being here. But yeah, work in schools, work in communities, and that's where I am now.
Amazing. So can you tell us a little bit more, Ruth, about like what your current role entails and how it serves young people?
Yes. So my role entails quite a lot. It's quite broad. I run a program that I developed for young people who are at risk of being excluded. So I work with the naughty kids in school. So I work with about 10 from one school and about 10 from another school, whose behaviour, for whatever reason, has reached a point where they are about to be excluded, and I work with them in school. In addition to that, I see them at home, so I meet whoever the adults are at home to try and work with them as well. Then Wednesdays, I'm very privileged. The charity I work for is a Christian charity, so we spend our whole Wednesday mornings just praying for our young people, praying for the communities that we work in. And I guess this is probably not linked to that question, but I would say one of the challenges is when I try and pitch the work that I do to schools, and they're like, why does it work? I'm like, well, because of Jesus, that's why it works. It works because I pray for these young people. It doesn't work because of a program I put together. It works because I have a team of people praying for these young people, but it is such a privilege. And then Thursdays and Fridays, I work in different estates. So I run some of the activities on these estates. So one for children and families and one for teenagers, like a drop-in youth club.
Great.
That's cool. And so, I mean, you mentioned being 14 and getting involved in youth work. I have to say you were a very mature 14-year-old, even still thinking you're an adult, but and I, as someone who was your youth worker, I'm very proud of you. But how do you get young people who you're proud of, don't you? Ruth is one of those young people from my youth group. We won't interview the rubbish ones who came through. But how, over that kind of working through that period, how has God kind of led and moved and changed you?
Oh my gosh, massively. I would go as far. There is no way I could do the work that I do if it wasn't for Jesus. I think, I'm just in some ways I'm in awe of the other agencies that we work with that work in schools that don't have the faith side of it. So I think for me, being a Christian in it all is what keeps me going. And actually, that's where, when I was 14 and going along to different things and God being like, what, God, break my heart for what breaks yours, and doing that kind of very bold prayer, where you're not really, I don't think, expecting anything, but actually then God's like, no, I'm really going to break your heart for young people. And it almost is like a physical pain that I think I really did feel at kind of 14, 15. Even though I was a young person myself, was that thing of like, no, Jesus really, really cares for the one, and he really, really cares for the young people. They are the next generation. They need discipleship, they need mentors, they need role models. So I think that's kind of the backbone of it. Then as I've kind of gone through my journey of working with Christian young people and now working with non-Christian young people, so most of the young people we work with aren't from a faith background, then that my change there is actually like, this is what God's put detached youth work on my heart. And actually it's really interesting then, as a charity, we're trying to work out what does that look like. And hopefully our prayer, I know we've currently got 10, but our prayer of 25 young people that will be taken to Limitless this year. So please be praying for that, because it kind of freaks me out a little bit. But yeah, that's the plan. I definitely wavered off your question there, but
Wow, that is pretty amazing though.
Yeah. And just for those who don't know anything about Limitless, just a brief little section on why you chose to take them there and what you're hoping will happen.
So Limitless is a Christian youth festival in the summer. So there's now kind of different ones. I think it was originally, well, it is still run by the Elim Church, but is for all churches. We're not a church, we're just a youth group from, well, we're multiple youth groups across multiple estates. And yes, it's a week-long camping experience for young people, where they get to experience what church is like. There's different seminars they can go to, different things to do in the afternoons, football tournaments, water fights, all of those sort of things. So yeah, we've chosen Limitless to go to. We are praying that the right people are there to speak to our young people, that our young people listen, they are respectful.
For context, that's pretty brave, because I remember first deciding to take a group of young people to Soul Survivor, and things like that are pretty in your face Christian. So it was a bit of a soul searching thing for me before to take people from Christian homes essentially to that kind of a camp. So taking people from non-Christian homes and from homes of other faith to those camps, it's very cool. It's a cool thing. So
yeah. I mean, we're trying to yes, young people definitely choose what they want to listen to. So when you're describing it, they'll hold on to some things and they'll be like, festival, who are the acts? I'm like, no, not like that sort of festival, but whatever it is that gets them there, I don't care. Yeah.
And I remember having chats and stuff about youth work over the years and things. What would you say are some of the big lessons that you've learned, or things that you like, struggles that you've faced, and things that you've learned to overcome during your time working with UDB and church youth work and all that kind of stuff?
So I would say one of the massive things that I've learned is the power of consistency, and the power of being there. So I'd know that as a young person myself, having Olly as my youth leader from the start to the end was just hugely formational, to know that there was that person that cared so much. I would also say, so now working for a charity, like, I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but actually we all wear blue hoodies, so we all have this sort of identity, and we're all in blue. The young people around the estates all know us for being in blue, and the van that we drive. Actually, I've been having conversations recently with a dad that brings his kids along to our group, and he went, I used to come to UDB activities when I was 12.
Wow.
How are Andy, how are Sam? And having that conversation, and instantly there's a trust there because of what's gone before. And he's instantly like, I can't wait for my boys to grow up so that they can go on to the trips that you guys do and all of that. And I think actually he was one that went to Soul Survivor with Andy and Sam back back in the day. He's not a Christian, but we can still be praying for that. But actually, he's still like, I want my kids to experience that. So although that wasn't me back 20 years ago, but actually that consistency of a youth work presence, that consistency of, for us, it's like they know us as UDB, so that consistency of us being in that area, like it doesn't need to be me the whole time, but actually my colleague can go along, and there's that connection with a young person because they're like, I trust the blue hoodie, so I trust you guys. So I'd say that's something that I've massively learned, is the power of consistency. Challenges, young people are hard work, and I would say I think it's really hard to find volunteers. I know a lot of people will feel that. So for example, on a Thursday I run a children's and families drop-in. We have about 40 coming along and don't have enough team. If there weren't the parents and carers there, we'd be out of ratio, but they are there, so we're okay. But it's finding those volunteers is really hard, and getting people on board with the importance of something is really hard. But when you've got them and you get a good volunteer, they're priceless, and you're like, you are fantastic, like please never leave, like this is amazing. And then I'm trying to think of then challenges with young people. They are hard work and they let you down, and that's really hard when you invest so much in a young person and then it gets thrown back in your face and you're like, okay, God, I'm just going to pray that I'm part of a bigger picture and they'll eventually come back and I'll have this amazing testimony of this young person coming back. But actually in the moment it's really hard when you see an attitude shift or they stop coming because you had to raise a safeguarding issue or whatever it might be. That's hard because it's all based on relationship. So I think that's where it's hard, because as a youth worker you fall in that space that's really precious. You're not a social worker, you're not a teacher, you're not the police, you're not a parent, but you are still a professional. So relationship so much better than in those other professions, I think. But then it's really hard when a young person lets you down because you feel the weight of that. So that's a challenge, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge, and it shows, to my mind, that there's something right there too. If you don't feel it, I think, that shows. Oh, why aren't I? Yeah, the fact that you're disappointed shows that there's an investment there.
Yeah,
totally.
Have you got a question for us?
Well, this thing you said, prepare a fun question, and I didn't really know what kind of a fun question you were talking about. Are we talking you want a fun question like, if you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be? Or are you wanting a fun question like, tell me the most daring thing you've ever done, or the biggest challenge you're facing right now? I don't know, pick one of those three. They're your three questions.
Okay, let's leave one, and me and Becky will answer one each. Becky, you can go first. I'll pick from the other two that are left.
Okay. I'll do superpower. If I could have a superpower, what would I have? I think I would choose to have the ability to like change people's emotions in a good way. So like you'd be able to like be insightful to like know if someone was like down in the dumps or anxious or like had a negative emotion and you had like, you could just like click your fingers and they would not feel that way anymore. I think that would be a cool superpower to have.
A very good youth work superpower to
Yeah.
have. I love that.
A little bit out of the box.
And also clearly someone speaking this to a new mum with a baby that cries. I can see you clicking your fingers in that environment. Be happy. That'd be great. Do that with my kids.
Yeah.
Okay, and most daring thing, because that was the other kind of more funnish on a part of superhero question. I'm not that daring. I've done quite a few stupid things. So I think Ruth definitely heard this story before, but I'd rather give something a go than just kind of wait it out. You have the 10 seconds of courage type thing that you just jump in 2 feet, which works well sometimes and also sometimes leads to incredibly embarrassing situations. Like when I was on a train from Germany to Austria and I didn't know how the doors worked. and I was really, really desperate for a wee. And I kept looking, and every time someone went through the doors, they put their hand up, like up high. And I was like, okay, cool. So, and like to get into the carriage, I'd like forced open this like automatic door feeling type thing. So I was like, that can't be right. So desperate for a wee, wasn't probably thinking all that straight. And I got up and up above, and kind of stupid. I'm not really even sure why, but I pulled the big red handle, and immediately the train stopped. And my wife was like looking at me like dying with embarrassment. And some people in the front just near where I stopped the train, who was speaking to me in German. And I was like, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm English. And they were like, oh, that makes sense. And then the train conductor was furious, and he took me into a private room to shout at me. And I was like, do you want my then girlfriend, now wife, to translate for us, because I don't speak German and you don't speak English? And he was like, no, nein, I talk to you on your own. And that mostly he said like warum, which is German for why. And he did have some English, and he very embarrassingly pointed out that it said on the sign on the handle below in English that was the emergency brake. But yeah, that was a negative product of my approach of like 10 seconds of courage, where I was like, well, I'll give it a go.
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, exactly. What's the worst that could happen? And that probably, pulling a big red handle on a train, the worst thing that can happen is that you stop the entire train, especially on a German railway where like they're actually on time. Late. It's not like doing that in England. Yeah, they were cross. That's very embarrassing.
Yeah. What area of youth ministry are you most passionate about, and why?
Can I say all of them? No. It really has changed for me, and I think going back to a previous question around kind of God shaping kind of my heart and calling me into different places and all of that. So it's like, originally my area of youth ministry really was within the church, and that growing, like coming alongside Christian mentoring one-to-one. I just loved it and still do. I don't think it's bad. I think it's great. But actually, I think through that, God was preparing me for where I am now, which is the detached youth work. So working with the harder to reach young people, the more challenging in some ways young people. And within that, my particular sort of niche, and I've been so blessed with working at Urban Devotion that I started off as kind of, we call them youth connectors, connecting with young people, and have become sort of niche within secondary school education. Now, success doesn't need to look like everyone getting 9s across the board. It doesn't even necessarily mean everyone getting a 4, if that's the pass, everyone getting a 4. But it actually just means for them, what does success look like? And I think for me, I grew up in a very nice area, a very nice part of the country, went to a very nice school, had nice friends, went to university. I very much lived that life. But actually, I now work with young people where their postcode is a reason why they struggle in school. Their postcode is a reason why they don't have the same opportunities I did, and I don't think that's fair. So that's kind of my main thing. And then with that, I really do just feel like as Christians, kids are being influenced by so many people, like the voice from home, the voice from school, that actually getting Christians out of the church into secular workplaces, into the places where young people are meeting, on the street corners where young people are meeting, in the park when they might be doing things that they shouldn't do, actually having Christians out on the streets, in the schools, in the youth clubs, meeting with these young people. That's where I feel the passion, is being those role models in actually some really, really dark places. And I think so many, or not, are so up for talking about faith. I think there's something that I think as adults we might be a bit fearful of asking what they think about faith, but kids are so interested in spirits, in what's out there, in crystals, in all of that, that actually they are intrigued by what is the Holy Spirit, what is Jesus. They're interested by Allah. They're interested in all of these different identities and stuff that actually I think Christian youth workers being in the spaces where there is influence is where I want to be and where I think we should be.
Nice. So if someone's listening and they're like, oh, I love the sound of UDB, that all sounds really amazing, how can they get involved, either directly getting involved or in any other way supporting it? If someone's heart's just like, yes, this sounds great and I want to get involved, what can they do?
Loads. So if you're listening, get a pen and paper. No, so I guess, well, the first one is we are actually recruiting. So I am going to do a little recruitment plug. We're recruiting for three positions, but not necessarily 3 people. It could be more. We are recruiting some youth connectors. So they're like I was saying, what I was originally recruited as. So on the streets, in schools, running youth clubs, children's clubs. We just, as a charity, we are growing at such a rate that we just really feel that God's wanting to do. So yeah, youth connectors, we are recruiting a youth work developer and communications developer. So if comms is your thing and developing the youth work delivery that we do, that's one. And then children's work. So as well as the youth work we do, we also do loads and loads of children's work. Our aim is to see a young person from them starting primary school to finishing secondary school, and someone from UDB journeying with them the whole way through. So we need children's workers. That's the other thing. So there are jobs all based in North Birmingham, which is, yes, that's one very, very obvious way to get involved. Other ways is just prayer. That's our main thing. We could not do what we do without prayer. And we have a massive prayer whiteboard up in our prayer room downstairs. I mean, how cool is it that I get to work in an office where we have a whole room dedicated to prayer, and we have this massive whiteboard where we write all of our prayer requests for all of the different estates we work in, and then we have this big section for answered prayer. And the way that God so specifically answers prayer, and I've actually just got a very quick story about this. We, for Limitless, we're only a small charity, we don't have loads of money. We were like, we need £1,200 to buy X number of tickets so that we can take these young people. So our young people are paying £20 to go to Limitless. Limitless does not cost £20 for a ticket and coaches and all of that. So we needed £1,200. The following week, or later that week, that was prayed for on the Monday. By the Thursday, we got a check through the post from one of our churches who just sent through and said, we just felt we needed to donate £1,200. We don't know what for, but here it is. And as a team, we were just like, oh my goodness, God wants us to take these young people to Limitless. It was such a specific amount. It wasn't just, can we just have some money for it? We put a number on it. We prayed for the number, and that number came through. So now we're praying for the young people to sign up, and we're very much on the way. But yeah, so prayer. And I think if there is that thing to pray for, it would really be praying for these young people coming along to Limitless. That actually this will be the start of a catalyst where these city kids that have no faith background or a different faith background, that actually the Holy Spirit will really meet with them and with their parents, carers at home. That's our big prayer. We can get them excited by it. We can bring them along to our youth group by calling it a pizza and a faith club. That's our biggest way in. Pizza is the way to get young people to talk about Jesus. But actually it's them going home with a letter and a parent and carer going, yeah, I want you to go to that. So that would be a real prayer. And then there is always financially getting involved. Everything's on our website. So it's urbandevotionbirmingham.org. Everything's on there. Ways to get involved, ways to give on our website.
Nice. So on the website, also the places to apply for the jobs if people want.
Yeah, so urbandevotion.org/vacancies, and they're all on there.
Okay, and there's still time to apply.
There's still time to apply. Some of them are just open because we're just really looking for the right people, and don't want, super time constraints to that. Some of them do have a closing date, but they are all still open. And we want to grow as a team. It doesn't matter age. It's not that we're not an all young, cool team. Like, we just want experience. We want good youth workers and people who've got a passion for young people. That's the criteria.
Can we put a link and stuff in the description?
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, we can sort it out on our Instagram and do a link to your.
Great.
Last question. We're almost at the end. What advice or encouragement would you give to other youth or kids leaders who are listening?
Great. I think, as cringe as it sounds, I would say just keep going. I think recently, I would say I started to feel a bit of just like, oh, I'm just going through the motions. I'm just playing table tennis with these young people. We're playing a game here. Like, I'm giving them a toasty. Like, is this actually doing anything? Am I just babysitting? That's kind of, and I actually even went to my line manager and I was like, I just feel like I'm babysitting and I'm being paid to do it. And she really challenged me to, again, go to God in prayer. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'll take it to the Lord. But actually, then the following week in Tesco and in Aldi, and then this dad that came along to the group that I run, all three of them saw me in my jumper and said, oh, you work for UDB. I used to come and I wouldn't be who I am now if it wasn't for the youth workers that I had. And I was like, okay, God, like, we've just got to keep going, because we just don't know the tiny impact that those conversations over a game of pool, of a table tennis, or the meet up to go for a coffee actually has on a young person's life. And God really showed me that just in the following week, seeing these different people who were all like, oh, make sure you go and say hi to Andy for me, or say hi to Emma for me, who were with them and for them 15 years ago. And actually then going and giving that encouragement to Andy and Emma and the rest of the team, you see them light up and you're like, oh, that, I want those people for me. Like, I want to be that person. So I think it is the just keep going, because it's all just part of a bigger story. And you never know the impact of that difficult conversation or the milkshake that you have. Like, you never know how much that means to a young person.
Yeah, totally. I think sometimes that's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? That we don't actually see the fruit of what we do. And sometimes we can convince ourselves that there is none, when actually it's just that we're not the ones who get to see it. And we don't know what's going to happen down the line. And actually, I think one of the most powerful things we can do is just be obedient to what God's calling us to do. And like, God knows what's going to happen with our investment or what we're putting in. And sometimes it seems like it's going nowhere, but actually in reality, like, there's ripples that go through time that we just won't see the outcome of, which is frustrating for us in like, in this moment at this time when we might not see the fruit of it, but at some point down the line, there is going to be fruit, and there will be people in heaven who won't be there without our input. And I just think that's a complete joy, isn't it, that God and amazing thing that God invites us ordinary people on this journey to like give our little 2 pence into the scheme of things. And actually, as a result, God does amazing things with our little investment that we choose to be obedient and give in.
Yeah, and it doesn't always, like, I think it's definitely, it doesn't always feel like it. I have, I'm sure everyone else has had that feeling of like, am I just babysitting for a bunch of people who don't want to be here anyway? Like, and wouldn't I be better off doing something else? Because it's not always in fact, it's more often than not glamorous. And those moments where people say nice things, or you see a big moment, a big transformation in someone's life, they're so much rarer than I think, because often when we read books, even books by people who've been doing youth work, sorts of things like that, it's always the highlights, like the highlight reel. And a good ministry isn't the highlight reel. It's everything in between. And actually, that's where some of the value is.
I think one of the, like, I've been involved in youth work for a long time, and I think one of the biggest things people say to me when I tell them what I do, they're like, oh, youth work, that must be so rewarding. And my first answer is always like, no, because like most of the time it isn't rewarding, and it doesn't feel like that at all. Just like what you were saying, Ruth, like you kind of feel like you're banging your head against a wall and nothing's really happening, and like we're just sowing all these seeds that are just going nowhere. And so like I always have to like bite my tongue and not answer no, because I don't want it to come across like I'm just doing like a pointless job. But also, like, it's not like you get a thank you every day, and it's not like you see like wild fruit all the time, or like, you know, it doesn't always feel like the most rewarding thing ever at all. But I just think like it's not necessarily rewarding in that sense, but it definitely is worth it.
Yeah, I think to just remind you of a story you just said, you don't get a thank you every day. The last week when I was with some young people, you know, sort of like, hiya, how are you doing? Come on in. I had 2 young people ask me, hey, I'm good, thank you, Ruth, how are you? And honestly, the shock on my face that I'd been asked how I was by these young people, I was like, I don't know how I am actually. How am I actually? What's an appropriate response to give you? Why have you just asked me? What are you after? But yeah, you're right. It's not always the thank you so much for everything. You don't even sometimes get asked how you're doing. That it took me by surprise when these boys asked me how I was. I was like, I don't know really. Better now that you've asked me.
Yeah, and at the same time, it is a mega privilege to get to do it. And like, I think when we're for me anyway, seeing those answers to prayer, having those moments where you see a breakthrough in what you've been kind of working for so long, that's a massive reward. We're on our time, so I think we'll finish there. Unless, Ruth, you have anything else you want to share to the listeners?
No, I don't think so.
Great. Well, thank you for being with us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, etc. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Ruth. And thanks for listening,
Thanks
everybody else.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.